Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Southside Point of View. I am Josh, along with Chorizy, as this show is on the From the 108 YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching again. Again, this is a episode, or I guess show, regarding as far as The Mandalorian, something that Chorizy and I are very geeked about, and it continues to get better as we go through season 2 and just completed chapter 15, The Believer. And this is what this episode is going to be about. There's also some big news from Disney as well. They had their investor relations call, and with investor relations, you're trying to impress your investors and try to convince them to keep your stock or buy more of it to enhance your company value. And Disney did not waste any time making some huge announcements regarding as far as their future with the Star Wars universe and their plans for Disney Plus and movies upcoming to expand as far as the stories regarding as far as Star Wars. Very exciting stuff. We're going to touch on both of those. And we're going to first start with the episode recap of chapter 15. And I have to say this because there are people out there that keep doing this to themselves. But if you do not want to get spoiled regarding chapter 15, The Believer, please stop watching this. Go watch that episode and then come back and watch this. As Chorizy and I will be discussing as far as the key themes and key items from this episode that I feel are important and should stick with you because they could be told in future episodes and stories, television series, maybe even movies in Star Wars. And of course, the most important topic, Chorizy, after this episode, are your TPS reports completed?
I mean, I love that drop. And you have to wonder if Bill Burr just said it. You know, like if he just decided he's going to throw that in. It was perfect. It obviously, doesn't mean anything in the Star Wars universe, but it's just fun to throw those little types of things in there. And I think that's something that's been great about the show, about the TV show versus like a movie. Like, because there's so much more time over the expanse of a show, there's time to throw in little fan service things and little fun things like that. I loved it.
Yeah, and I definitely caught that when he dropped the TPS reports. It's the first time TPS reports has ever been mentioned in Star Wars, but I love the little Easter egg, and I thought that was absolutely fantastic. But when it comes to this episode, joking aside, it does answer the first question that we had from last week. How many people fit in Slave One? And it looks roomy.
I mean, it must run on magic because I don't know where the engine is in this thing because it's all seating. It's amazing. First the effect was cool when it's like when it's shifting and they kind of stay in place and everything around them moves. I thought that was awesome. It looked really cool. It's also ridiculous.
It's
the amount
huge.
of space in there is ridiculous.
It really is, especially later in the episode when Boba Fett picks him up and they jump on the platform. It doesn't look like they got a lot of room there. It doesn't look like there's a lot of clearance, but it looks space like there's a lot of room. Maybe everyone is really short in this. Like Din is only 5 feet tall, and Bill Burr is like 5'8" or like 4'8", playing characters. Maybe everyone's really small, but we did have this question last week. If you watched last week's episode, we were wondering how many people fit in Slave One, and evidently it is very roomy in that spaceship.
I made the joke that are they going to make it like the TARDIS in Doctor Who? And they did. They literally did.
Yeah, they did. Oh man. But anyways, moving past the TPS reports and how many people fit in Slave One. The star of this episode is obviously Bill Burr playing Migs Mayfeld, and the dialogue and the conversation that he has with Din, the Mandalorian, in this episode really takes it a notch. Obviously, they go pick him up as he's cutting up TIE fighters, part of the chain gang, which I think is really cool. That's a perspective that we don't see in Star Wars. What do criminals do? They break down old TIE fighters. But as they try to sneak into the Imperial base, I feel, Chorizy, this is where the episode really picks up and in a way differentiates itself from everything that we've seen as far as The Mandalorian. And I think in a really good way. And that's why I have the topic of real talk with Mando and Mayfeld, because I think this is the real conversations that are happening. As far as the Star Wars universe, with Star Wars, we get so caught up in the battle of Jedi versus Sith, but we often forget that there are in this universe real people. And some people don't care because they only care about the movies and it's just, a story. Why do we got to take a deep dive on how citizens feel in this made up galaxy? I find it intriguing because you can see some parallels with it with real life, especially real life war torn situations. This is how people feel that have to live during those types of times. And I really enjoyed, as far as this conversation in the rig, in the juggernaut between the Mandalorian and Mayfeld. How did you feel about, as far as the dialogue between these two characters?
I thought it was great, and I think that you've seen throughout the series that kind of the way that Mando thinks about things is being broken down over time. He's
Yeah.
seeing things and he's learning things that he didn't know about, and as he does, the kind of the strict confines of his belief system are being slowly broken down. But I think everybody has a person like this in their life
I think
that
we've all
is
been through that,
a little
though.
bit of a jerk, right? And like they are usually the one to bring it home for you because they'll just bluntly tell you that what you're thinking or how you're thinking about things is just stupid. And Bill Burr delivers that very well. And Bill Burr could play a jerk. I mean, like you've seen his stand-up comedy, that's his bit. So like I thought it was like it was kind of the perfect person to say it to him. And I didn't think it was gonna be. I was really hesitant about this episode. I like Bill Burr, but I was like, do we need to bring him back? Like I'm happy to see him. I think it's gonna be fun. Um, but it ended up being probably one of the most important conversations of this whole season. So I loved it. And I think, you know, everyone has had that jerk that told you like, that girl you're dating, she's terrible. And you were like, well, I was kind of thinking that for a while. I'm glad someone just said it out loud. And so that's what he's doing here. This is he's telling him, he's telling him his feelings and kind of breaking himself down to
Mm-hmm.
explain to Mando, like, dude, is it the helmet that you're not supposed to take off, or is it your face you're not supposed to show? And there's no response. And I don't think it's because Mando just likes being silent. I think it's because he doesn't know.
That's true. I mean, again, Din is part of the Mandalorian tribe that's very on the religious side, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did not see that with Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan, you know, is not from the religious side clans of Mandalore. Uh, it's very much buying into Mandalorians are warriors, and this is survival of the fittest. And if your tribe is the fittest, you could rule Mandalore. Whereas even Din mentioned in his conversations with Bo-Katan a few episodes earlier in this season that all is lost in Mandalore. And we do get a little bit of here where we hear about Alderaan being
Mm-hmm.
lost and Mandalore being lost. Migs brings that up. Do we believe that? Do we believe Mandalore no longer exists?
I don't. I think Mandalore probably suffered a fate similar to more like Geonosis, where the
Hmm.
planet is still there, but there's little to no life left on that planet. And so I wonder if kind of it's it's still there, but in Din's mind, it's cursed and
Right.
no one should go there. In Mig's mind, there's no one there, so who cares? It might as well not exist.
Right.
And I think we're gonna find out.
I do too. And Migs's comment, everyone's the same, really brought back as far as some memories for me, Chorizy. Especially when we go back to The Last Jedi, to DJ, played by Benicio del Toro, when he's with Finn escaping the Las Vegas planet, the Monte Carlo planet. And when they're in the ship and Finn realizes, oh, you stole this ship. And Finn is trying to, play up as far as the good guy. It's DJ that brings up as far as the ship owner, what they were selling. Be like, ooh, this guy's a bad guy. He sells TIE fighters to the First Order. Oh, and he also sells X-Wings to the New Republic. And it's just a line, and probably the best part of that movie for me is good guys, bad guys, made up words. It's all a machine partner, live free. And again, if you're a character in the Star Wars universe, it's not a Jedi or a Sith, or you're not wrapped up as far as the Republic or the Imperial forces or the First Order or the Empire, I think this is the only thing you strive for, is, as Migs, mentioned in that ride in the Juggernaut with Din, is that, we're just trying to sleep at night. Whatever helps you sleep at night. And if you wake up the next day, you're doing a lot better than most are. And that's just something that you don't expect to see from a Star Wars show, especially growing up. It's all been about starship battles and laser battles, as far as on the ground, stormtroopers against other troopers, and then Jedi versus Sith. This is kind of where it's bringing some reality into the Star Wars universe. And I enjoy it. I think it enhances the storylines, and it makes all the characters conflicted. And as you mentioned, it starts having a character like Din question everything that he's grown up in, as far as being the Mandalorian. And he's making the sacrifice. Why? Because he wants Grogu back. And the only way he can do that is getting Migs into this Imperial mining station to tap into the terminal and find out where Moff Gideon is. And he is willing to make that sacrifice, shedding his Mandalorian armor and putting on Stormtrooper armor. And I really enjoyed the symbolism in that decision.
And then, I mean, he makes a lot of choices in this episode that go against kind of, his basic creeds, right? Like, I mean, like, so at first we think those are pirates that are attacking them, and then you start to see, like, this is probably people from that planet trying to get the Empire off their planet.
Right.
And he plows through, I don't know, 20 of them. So he like kills like 20 people just to, not just to, but in order to continue on his quest to get Grogu back. Then he takes his helmet off. There's a lot of things in this where he just kind of goes away from what we know to be his creed in the earlier seasons, or earlier season and earlier episodes.
And
So it's
there is that shot when he's in the Juggernaut, right? And he's looking at the kid. How did you feel about that shot when he's looking through the window and he makes eye contact with the kid on the side of the road as they drive through the tiny little village? I wonder if he saw himself in that kid. Because again, in season 1, we saw the flashback scenes in The Mandalorian on how the Mandalorian saved him when the separatist robot army, the droid army, invaded as far as his village and assumingly killed his parents and a lot of people in the village, and the Mandalorian saved him and he became a foundling. You mentioned as far as the natives, and that also adds conflict because he's been in that situation before, being the native trying to fight off a superior force. And that even adds more conflict of, I don't want to kill you, but I need to get this into the Imperial stronghold because I need to steal information from the Imperial stronghold. I don't want to do this, but you leave me no choice.
Right.
And that is one of the difficult and decisions that any of the Star Wars heroes we've known had to make.
And I think you bring up a good point with him seeing himself in the kid, because even past that, they add a few little pieces to kind of drive home, that Din is not from Mandalore, because Migs mentions you guys from Mandalore, thinking Din is from there, and then the Richard Brake's character, I forget his name, uh, asks him where he's from,
Right.
and he's very hesitant to give that answer. And then there's an interruption, and he never does. So we
So we
technically still
don't
don't know
know.
where he's from, but he is probably from a similar planet where the, at the time there was the what is it the, whatever federation was taking over his area. But like he's seen it from that kid's standpoint, and part of his whole thing is not letting other people know about all of this.
Hmm.
And he's seeing now, like, there is tons of people in his position that he grew up in, and it's it's still the same. New Republic or Empire or whatever, it's not any different, and he is going to have to make some crazy decisions in the next few episodes and seasons.
I wonder if there's some PTSD situation going on with Din regarding as far as his home planet, where he's from. Maybe he doesn't remember, because he was so young
Yeah,
when the Separatist droid army invaded and he was saved by the Mandalorians. And there's really no clues in those scenes from season 1 to tip us off on where he's from.
right.
Something to maybe monitor in future episodes. Throughout this entire time, he doesn't really serve any attachment, right? He just wants to help his Mandalorian clan and, stay underground and be able to help feed and, build up enough Beskar to help the foundlings. But things have certainly changed for Din, and I really do enjoy as far as that conversation. Of course, when they do save the Juggernaut and they do fight off the natives, and there's a great line of, "I've never been so happy to see stormtroopers," from Bill Burr's character. We get to the toast. And I think this is one of the best scenes in all of the Mandalorian so far. And that includes season 1. It is tense. It is awkward. It reminds me of the Tarantino movie, the World War II movie,
Inglorious Bastards.
Inglorious
Yeah,
Bastards.
very much.
When they're downstairs in the bar, right? Like, I'm just waiting when Din tips off the Imperial officer, "No, I don't belong here." I was just waiting for that to happen, very much like Inglorious Bastards, and then all hell breaks loose, right? For those that have seen that movie, that's how it felt. And I really enjoyed this scene. And of course, you can see in the screenshot that Din has to take his helmet off because at the terminal, it requires a facial scan. And he's got to take his
and,
helmet off before the air
and
counts down.
any face will do.
Evidently, as long as you
I,
don't show up in their database, they're
yeah, I
just going to
guess.
assume you're part of the Imperial force now.
Yeah, I guess they're just assuming that you're as long as you don't show up as a criminal, that you're fine. I did laugh to cut back to that a little bit when Boba Fett says, "No, I think they'll recognize my face." Since it is literally the face of their entire army during the Clone Wars. So yes, I thought that was I thought that was a little nice Easter egg that they threw in there that I chuckled at when he said.
Yeah.
But speaking of face, like, the one thing I don't like about this scene is that it reminds me, like, how much emotion we've lost from Din's character by just seeing a metal helmet for all this time. like,
Yeah.
like Pedro Pascal is such a good actor, and like he's so awesome. Like his facial expressions in this are just so good during this like very tense moment, and his like little nod to to Bill Burr, like, "Hey, don't, I know what you're doing. Don't do this."
Yeah. Just shaking his head like, "Don't do it."
It's all so good, and it's like, oh man, I I could have used his facial expressions a few times throughout the series, and he does a tremendous job of having like, or giving emotion with a helmet on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a credit to him, but man, you kind of like miss it at this point. You're like, oh man, this could be really good if we could see his eyebrows.
Well, the gossip and the rumors before the season launched is that there was trouble in house between Disney and Pedro Pascal. That Pedro, like, there was the rumors that the Mandalorian is not the main character of this upcoming season, that it's going to be Ahsoka or all these side characters. We have learned that those rumors are false, very false. Din has been by far and away the primary character.
Yeah.
We're getting episodes without Grogu. Grogu is not in this episode at all. I think that's the first time since ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, since ever. This is the first episode without Baby Yoda in it, with the Mandalorian. But there was rumors that he wants to play Din without the mask more often. And he gets like a half episode. And I wonder if that's going to change. I wonder if how everything plays out in season 3, Chorizy, we're going to see more Pedro Pascal playing Din without the helmet on.
I could see how they could do it. Grogu could take the helmet off of him. Like if they go get him, if they find him and Grogu removes his helmet, I think he'll allow it. I think that would be allowed. Yeah. And I think that could be when it all starts to unravel of like he's not following this creed anymore. He's, taking care of his family.
Right. So the toast. What are they toasting to? Operation Cinder. And this is a screenshot from the Battlefield 2 Star Wars game. And Operation Cinder is a huge operation in Star Wars lore. This is the timeline after Return of the Jedi, shortly after Return of the Jedi. And the background with Operation Cinder is that Emperor Palpatine has these holograms, and there are many of them, and they're in these floating red suits, and they look weird. And it's got to be droid, and I'm sure there's some type of Sith power attached to them. But they are with major Imperial Star Destroyers, the significant ones. And after his death, part of his plan, because he doesn't want anyone else to take over as far as the Empire, and we know why, because if you have watched The Rise of Skywalker, he's got plans to stick around forever. But Operation Cinder was part of as far as his plan, and he activates it shortly, much like Order 66 to kill the Jedi. After his death, the remaining Imperial forces that are still active are to move forward with Operation Cinder. And it's a satellite-based weapon. And the best way I could describe it, I call it global warming death rays, where they shoot down as far as this type of energy into the planet. It creates just so much geothermal damage to the planet itself that the planet starts to die. Major hurricanes, major storms. And that's where Bill Burr's character is going into as far as in the toast was, let's toast to Operation Cinder. I lost my entire division in Operation Cinder. All those people died. And then you have the Imperial officers say, all heroes in the Empire. And then the great, retort from Mayfeld is, dead heroes. And he was obviously part of the Operation Cinder. And the thing that's really interesting with Operation Cinder, one would think, all right, Star Destroyers, destroy the Republic-backed planets. No, they were destroying some of the fiercest loyalists to the Empire. Any planet that they could destroy to strike fear in the galaxy, to pretty much rule in fear, that even though the emperor is dead, we are still in charge. That was this attempt. And again, the timeline is very shortly after the events on Endor. So party with the Ewoks, and then all of a sudden, hours, if not days later, the Empire is doing this one really terrible thing, which is Operation Cinder. Side note, Luke Skywalker would have totally felt masses of people dying with Operation Cinder. So Luke,
Yeah.
Leia, Han Solo, this would have been like one of the very first things. Party, party, party. I see my dad. I see Obi-Wan Kenobi. I see Yoda as the space ghost. And oh no, this terrible thing is happening. Everybody get into your ships. We got to find whoever is remaining of the Imperial force. So that's Operation Cinder. That's the very short of it. And it was a significant, and in a lot of ways, it almost did as much damage as the Death Star did to significant planets and ships.
Yeah, I mean, you can almost compare it to, the damage Starkiller Base did,
Right.
because it's a number of planets that were destroyed. Um, them bringing this in to this show, um, it kind of brought up something that I've been thinking about as we found out that Thrawn was coming back into the show, and in the kind of end days of the of Rebels, when he gets sucked out into the unknown regions, in the books that lead up to that, he's starting to believe that the Emperor is going to kill him, and that things are not in a good situation with him and the Empire. I don't think he's terribly in enthralled with the Empire. He doesn't seem to really care about them as much as he cares about the Chiss. I think he would have been a target in Operation Cinder, and I think that they may have tried to kill him. And I think that he is not, while he's alive and while he's going to be part of the show and while he's going to be attacking probably our our stars of the show, our heroes of the show, um I don't think it's on behalf of the Empire. I think that he will be either on his own or as part of the Chiss ascendancy, taking land in this kind of free for all that he sees. He would not go for the strategy that is being operated in Operation Cinder or any of the contingency plan that they had. He would hate that. So I think that makes him more of a target. I think Vader would have been a target as well had he survived. Um, but yeah, I don't think, if you look, they take a bunch of people out in the Aftermath books into the unknown regions. Thrawn had done his part for the First Order. He had basically mapped out that unknown region for them so they could get out there. They had no more use for him, and the only thing he would be the person who's going to take over. And Palpatine doesn't want that, so I think they would have tried to kill him, and I think they probably did. They probably did try to kill him, and so I think his presence in the show might be as a third party to all of this, which would be very interesting. And then start to add those things like you were talking about. Who are the good guys and bad guys? If the Chiss Ascendancy is making a land grab, and the Mandalorians are doing the same, who's good and who's bad?
This becomes very Game of Thrones, right?
Yes.
In Star Wars. Everyone's trying to reach for power. And I have a little bit more into that later, as far as in this episode, when we talk about future Star Wars shows pitches. I have an idea for that, but I think that is a really good theory, Chorizy. And I do hope that comes into fruition. It's like at the end of Rebels that even though Ezra thinks I am saving my friends and the rebellion by hyperspacing into the unknown regions with Thrawn, he may have saved his life.
Right. Yeah, because he'd be much harder to find, and they wouldn't be able to put the entire force against him, much like they did to the Jedi. So it's interesting. We'll find out what's going on with Thrawn soon enough, I hope.
Yeah, so for those that watch the episode and you're wondering about Operation Cinder is a major event in Star Wars lore, but it hasn't been covered by any show, by any movie, just as far as in the video games. Again, it's Battlefront 2 for Star Wars. So if you play it, you play through Operation Cinder, but I wonder if it's worthwhile. It is it's a huge event, again, in Star Wars lore. And, we all thought it's all fun and games after the Death Star 2 blew up, but clearly it was not. And it does make sense. If you're in a war and your leader dies, it's not like the Taliban quit after Osama bin Laden was killed.
Right.
They stick around. Somebody else continues as far as the plan. And the remaining forces of the Empire continue with Emperor Palpatine's plan. And the first part of that is Operation Cinder. And I think this is something that should not be lost, because if you're going to enter Operation Cinder uh, into the Mandalorian, I think this could help as far as bridge the gap with the Rise of Skywalker, Chorizy, is that in future episodes of Star Wars shows, even in the new episodes, if you touch on the little plans that Palpatine is scheming or conspiring, could ultimately lead to the big plan that gets unveiled in Rise of Skywalker. And I think it could help tie the beginning part of that movie where it just doesn't really make sense. And they do, J.J. Abrams does, I'll just say it, J.J. Abrams does a poor job explaining how Emperor Palpatine is back.
Yes.
But if you use these new 10 Star Wars shows, we'll talk about those more in a moment. And if you're going to use The Mandalorian here, if you start adding puzzle pieces, then the audience can understand on how he still existed, or how he still got involved, even though we thought he was dead when Darth Vader threw him down the power shaft.
So you mentioned this, and I was like kind of laughing to myself, just thinking Kathleen Kennedy. It almost seems like she's on one of those like home improvement shows, like where they like redo someone's house, and she's like here's this tiny shack that I built that makes no sense with the floor plan or anything, and hands it to Jon Favreau and like, can you turn this into a mansion?
Right.
And he's like, well, I probably want to say, well, let's just tear it down and then we'll start over. And she's like, no, you got to build it from here. So he's like, okay, that's going to take what is it, like 11 different shows?
Yep.
That's what we're gonna.
That's what it's gonna take
to do this. And I think
all to make Rey have Rey make sense, right?
Yeah, they will slowly build it, in these tiny pieces to make this structure actually functional.
And that shack is Rey, right? Am I on the same page with you with your analogy here?
I mean, the shack is kind of the entire trilogy, but okay. Like I think it is more so Rey. Like because Rey was a good character when they built it, but they wiped out the foundation. Really, they kind of like it. Her being nobody was so good. It was such a good touch. I loved it. And then she had to be related to Palpatine. So I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. I like the Emperor. I didn't want him back. Not, or at least not the way that we got him. So maybe they can convince me that it's good, and I'll take it. But yeah, we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting if they start building towards, like, using pieces of Aftermath, which they've already done by having Cobb Vanth in the show. Now pieces of the Contingency, which is partially in Aftermath. The Cinder's not in Aftermath, but the Contingency is. And so they're building up. They're taking in these pieces from these books, from these comics, from video games, and we'll see if they can build us something that makes us think, yeah, Rise of Skywalker actually makes sense now.
It's just going to take years.
Yes.
And 11 TV shows and maybe a couple of movies. But
it will cost $1 billion to do. But
yes.
maybe I think Disney's got the money, or at least after this week, they do.
They most definitely do. But again, something to just keep in mind, that Operation Cinder is one part. And I do wonder in future shows and episodes if we start seeing more puzzle pieces to Emperor Palpatine's ultimate plan, which is to strive for immortality and be the Sith Lord and never be replaced. All right. So Valen Hess, by the way, is the name of the Imperial officer. I keep forgetting. He gone after, raving about the success of Operation Cinder, and Mayfeld just comes to his conscience that, based on the plan, like there is this big plan that obviously Valiant Hess is talking about. And maybe this is leading up to Starkiller Base, Chorizy. That was what I was thinking. Is there anything before Starkiller Base and after Operation Cinder that Valiant Hess is referring to that will make Operation Cinder look like it was a small operation?
Not really, because like, and I think they'll get into this in some of the future shows, but in the books at least, and I believe so in the movies, if I in the sequel trilogy a bit, uh, the core worlds don't really believe anything about the First Order or its might,
Right.
um, and so the first show of might really is the Starkiller Base, uh, you know,
And
destroying
then it's
all
too
of
late.
Hosnian Prime. Yeah. So like I think that's what he must be leading up to. Um I I thought, and maybe this is just me thinking incorrectly, that they were using kyber crystals to do the Starkiller Base, but I don't know, maybe there's some of this fuel too that they use. Seems like it's pretty damaging.
Well, Rhydonium we have seen in Rebels. Sabine Wren has a funny line, meet my friend, Rhydonium. And then she blows stuff up with it. Rhydonium is the fuel to power the starships.
Okay.
So very, very explosive type of material used to power as far as star destroyers, any type of that type of class ship, even for the New Republic as well. So huge amounts of rocket fuel
Yeah.
being mined on this planet. And we see that as far as in Migs Mayfeld's redemption as he shoots a canister and pretty much blows up the entire facility. That's
Yeah.
how explosive it is. But this redemption arc for this criminal who's in prison for the next 50 years, having to break down old TIE fighters, and given this opportunity to help out Mando, somebody that got him into prison, and thinking that, oh my God, you're here to kill me, helping him get to the terminal, get the information he needs to find Moff Gideon. And before they fly away on Slave One, takes the rifle and decides to help him sleep better at night. I need to blow up this fuel so they can't use it for something more devious than Operation Cinder, in which something like Operation Cinder makes it really hard for him to sleep at night.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, think about all the things he's seen. It's got to be incredibly difficult to live with what he has done as an Imperial, right? So
Mhm.
I get that. I mean, I think a lot of this show is these kinds of moments of this character who's probably, is not a hero, right? It's definitely not. Migs Mayfield's not a hero, but he redeems himself, and I think a lot of these characters are going on that path, right? uh Grief Karga was going to double cross Mando, and then the child healed him, and then he felt the need to defend Mando and the child. um and I think it ruins one of my theories, but at the same time you could start to see where they're going with this. Grogu is pulling all of these people along his path to the light side, right? Which
Hmm.
sucks because he should be a Sith and be Darth Grogu. But at the end of the day, it makes sense, right? Like everyone that he comes in contact with is becoming a better person through his, through dealing with him in some fashion or trying to help him in some fashion. And it's kind of like every person in this in this world is becoming a better person by being in Grogu's presence somehow. And so it feels like he's drawing people to the light side. Again, I don't want that to be the case, but it is appearing that it is. I don't think he'll do that to Gideon, though. Just to be clear.
No, no. And, something we haven't touched on, because Migs Mayfeld does mention this. When the name Moff Gideon comes up, he has zero interest in helping find Moff Gideon. And I think that's my takeaway from this episode. And as far as the series itself, because we're now approaching the season finale next week, we still don't really know Moff Gideon. We don't know how he's ascended to this status. We don't know how he has survived as far as what happened at the Battle of Endor. And maybe he's been part of Operation Cinder. Maybe he is another puzzle piece, or he's working on another puzzle piece, part of Emperor Palpatine's ultimate plan after death. Uh, I think we may find out that part, but we really don't know more about Moff Gideon. And just the name Migs Mayfeld, here's Moff Gideon. It's like, nope, I have zero interest in helping you. Send me back. I'll cut up TIE fighters. I found that to be really fascinating. And I don't know, is that a missed opportunity, Chorizy?
For him to go fight
Yeah,
Moff
like
Gideon?
fight, no, not to find him, but like spend 3-5 minutes explaining why I have zero interest in finding Moff Gideon. Maybe a line from Bill Burr like, Moff Gideon? Are you serious? Do you not know who Moff Gideon is? This is
Yeah.
why you should not find him.
Yeah, if he, like, he could have just said something like, that guy destroyed, you know, he could have kind of led up to the idea of Operation Cinder and said, Moff Gideon killed 50 of my best men. You know, just throw that in there, and then you get to Cinder, and then you're like, okay, well, this all makes sense. Yeah, I think it would have been good to mention it.
And maybe they shot it and it just wasn't included in the final cut. That often happens with TV shows and movies. But that's the one thing that I feel like is missing in this episode, is he hears the name Moff Gideon. He has zero interest. Why?
Yeah,
Why is Migs Mayfeld scared of Moff Gideon?
the only thing I could think is that they're trying to build up suspense and mystery around Moff Gideon to make him seem kind of bigger than he is, right? Or that he is that big, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
he's this like mastermind or something. And how did he survive? What did he do? You know, you don't know any of this, so it makes it more frightening. Like when you give Michael Myers a backstory, the movie's not as scary because
Mm-hmm.
it's not just some maniac killing everybody.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. So do you, to that point, do you need to know Moff Gideon's backstory, or are you okay? Are you okay with it still being mysterious, unknown?
If he continues to be like cold as hell, like I don't need his backstory.
Okay.
Like as long as he's ruthless through the rest of this, like I don't need his backstory. I don't need to know like unless it's meaningful in some like really meaningful in some way. I think I'm already terrified of him, which is I think how we're supposed to be.
Right. Now, speaking of Moff Gideon, the way this episode ends is totally badass. I love the way this episode ends. Reciting line by line back to Moff Gideon when they were outside of, was it the bar that they were outside of? Yeah, they needed to get a drink. And Moff Gideon flies down in his TIE fighter, and all the stormtroopers are out there line by line back to Moff Gideon, letting him know, I know where you are and I am coming. And that is such a great way to set up the season finale.
I think there is a change in the wording, and I thought I caught it, and I'll have to go back and just verify because I
Okay.
didn't go back and watch the other episode. But I think there's a pronoun change. I
Okay.
think Gideon says it in referring to the child,
Oh,
and
yes.
and Mando says he, and it's it's a
Hmm.
small change, but I think it's significant. I don't think Mando has any interest in taking this kid to the Jedi anymore. I think he's going to get his foundling. I think the quest is done. This if someone comes for he took Grogu to that mountaintop, he sent out the signal. If someone comes, that they'll talk about it then. But I think for now, this is his foundling. This is his clan that he's protecting. And I think the change from it to he is the moment where we see that.
That personal attachment. right?
Yeah, basically, this is my son, right? This is my child,
Yeah.
not the child.
And it's something we brought up on our first episode, which is episode 3 of our show. So a long time ago, 2 weeks ago, uh, and we talked about, is the Mandalorian really about Din or is Grogu? Will Grogu grow up to be a force wielding Mandalorian? I think that is awesome. And I hope that is the final destination. But just the way this episode ended, again, I get why Disney Plus has this released every single week to keep my subscription, for me to keep coming back to their streaming platform. It's a brilliant business move, but damn, when you watch this episode, it is, I want to start the season finale right now. I felt that way a couple weeks ago, but right now I want to start the season finale. That's how good this last scene was.
You said something a minute ago that kind of made me think of something, and I thought it was just kind of funny. Being a force wielding Mandalorian, like if they defeat Gideon, will Grogu have the dark saber? And when Bo-Katan comes for it, will Mando be like, "Oh, that's my kid's toy. You can't just take that." And now
It's interesting.
he's just got the dark saber as like his toy.
Yeah. So looking ahead, as far as to the season finale, we'll talk a little bit more about what we think could happen later, as far as in this episode. But after this episode, before this episode even aired, the big news, and we talked about at the beginning of this video, the investor relations call that Disney had. It was a lot of bombs being released. It wasn't just Star Wars, upcoming Pixar projects, upcoming Marvel projects, to get some clarity as far as new Marvel shows and Marvel movies that we're going to be receiving. But they did not leave out Star Wars, and they have huge plans for Star Wars. A couple years ago, I think there was some doubt, Chorizy, especially because the guys that were the showrunners for Game of Thrones, they were supposed to be getting a Star Wars trilogy. Ryan Johnson was supposed to be getting a Star Wars trilogy. And then all of a sudden, a couple years ago, they stopped. Disney killed off these projects. They kept The Mandalorian. And I think they have been pleasantly surprised on how successful The Mandalorian has been. And now Disney has totally changed their mind. And it's like, nope, green light, 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 green light. And it's
and almost all TV shows, as
a
opposed
lot
to
of TV shows,
as opposed to doing a lot of movies, which is always been the Star Wars way. I mean, if it was a TV show, it was a cartoon.
Right.
But man, they're going heavy on TV.
And so let's talk about as far as the new projects. And in this graphic, there's a couple of shows that we're missing. We're missing the Bad Batch. If you don't know that story, it is a clone army troop from the Clone Wars. In the final season, we do get to meet the Bad Batch. Great story. I think there's a lot of potential here. Continues as far as the story from a clone army perspective of what happens after Order 66. And how the Empire, the new formed Empire, moves away from clone troopers to stormtroopers, I think is going to be very intriguing. And of course, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, which doesn't have a exact title yet. I'm just going to go with the show title Kenobi at this moment. The big news for Kenobi is that Hayden Christensen, who played Anakin Skywalker, will be coming back and will be playing Darth Vader in the Kenobi show. And it will be set 10 years after episode 3. So Luke Skywalker is going to be 10 years old during this TV show. It looks like it's going to be about 6 episodes. So those are the two big show announcements that are not part of this image as you currently see as far as in our video.
Real quick on the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
That's the A-Team, right? Am I the only one thinking this? This is basically the A-Team.
Yeah.
I'm in for it. I think it's going to be fun. The trailer
I thought it was
awesome.
entertaining.
The trailer looked very awesome, but it is like the galactic A-Team. And I love the A-Team, so I'm all for it. I just wish Mr. T was voicing somebody.
Okay, that would be awesome. Did you not enjoy the Bad Batch episodes of Clone Wars in the final
No,
season?
I did. I did.
Okay.
I think the only thing in the final season that I wasn't crazy about was the episodes with the Martez sisters.
Yeah, I did not
Um,
get that.
but I think that was all part of this kind of what we've been talking about, where like this is how these wars affect just these normal people.
True. True. But, just kind of going through as far as the images that you see front and center is Ahsoka. So we thought in previous episodes of this show that you don't hire Rosario Dawson to play Ahsoka Tano, a fan favorite character, for one episode of The Mandalorian. She is getting her own show series. It'll be very exciting. As far as what to see from Ahsoka, you have Rangers of the New Republic. I don't know much about as far as this show. Very little is known. Andor, this is Cassian Andor from Rogue One, the Rebel spy. There's a lot more information behind the scenes, and that'll be one of the first series to come out on the backstory of Cassian Andor, and kind of gives a glimpse on how the rebellion was born and the dirty, nasty stuff that rebel spies had to do at the beginning of their rebellion to build up to what we see in Rogue One. Star Wars Visions could be very interesting on a creative aspect. They're hiring the top Japanese animators for Star Wars Vision, so we may get Star Wars anime, which could be very intriguing. And then Lando. Yes, Lando Calrissian is getting his own television series. Very exciting. Rogue One, I just bought the book. I will be reading as far as the book written by Michael Stackpole. Fantastic teaser explainer video from Patty Jenkins, the director of Wonder Woman, explaining her dad being a famous fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force and how she's got a huge goal. She wants to direct the greatest fighter pilot movie of all time. And she's combining that goal with Star Wars, and she is going to be directing the book adaptation of Rogue Squadron, meaning, Chorizy, we're getting Wedge back.
Yes.
Which is very exciting. But out of all these projects, Chorizy, which ones are you most excited about?
Yes, let me just kind of I'll pick off a few things real quick on each one. Obviously, me and Billy D go way back. I have a picture of me and him right there. I love the idea of a Lando series. I think Donald Glover is great, and
He's gonna crush it.
This is not my idea, but this is an idea I heard, and I absolutely love this idea of Billy D. Williams narrating stories of his past with Donald Glover playing them out in live action. I would be all over that. That would be the greatest fan service show of all time, and I don't care.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
The Ahsoka one, I think if you see the logo, it's the World Between Worlds, if I remember correctly what that looked like. And Josh,
Yes.
I haven't done acid in 20 years, but I'm gonna have to find a guy because if they're gonna do World Between Worlds, I mean I got to go Doc Ellis on this and watch it like that. So I'm in for that. I'm excited for that one, but I think it could get real weird.
Well, okay, let's stop. Marvel could be helping. And the reason I say Marvel could be helping, we are going into the multiverse timeline with the new Marvel Cinematic direction,
Yeah.
especially with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange.
The WandaVision show, which looks like it's going to be all over the place.
Right. If you can stick with that, you will be able to stick with the Ahsoka series. This is much tamer, the world between worlds, than what we are going to be going down, the path we're going to be going down with Marvel. So if you could stick with the Marvel multiverse, you'll be okay with the Ahsoka series.
Oh, I'm psyched for it. And then Rangers of the New Republic, I think that will be. I hope. I'm kind of on the fence in this. I don't know if I want Filoni to act in this, but I think Filoni will be in it because this is going to be those guys. At least what I'm thinking is those guys that are that find Din on the that beautiful ice spider planet.
Yep.
So I think it's going to be a lot of them. It's going to be a lot of them running into the First Order and running into possibly the Chiss, I hope, and really kind of not being believed. They're basically going to be the guy in every horror movie that's like, there's horrifying things over here, and everyone's like, sure there are. And I think that's going to be like a lot of their life in those shows. But here's the one that I'm really psyched about is the Acolyte. So if you did not grow up a good Catholic boy like I did, you might not realize that Acolyte is basically the same thing as an altar boy. It's someone who participates and assists in religious ceremonies. I assume this is going to be Sith. And if you look at the timeline that they've given us over the past few months, the the High Republic, which is going to be 300 BBY to 100 BBY, battle before the Battle of Yavin. That's how they do time in the Star Wars universe. So it goes up to about year 100. Now, this is Legends information, but this guy was born between like 140, 120 BBY.
Mhm.
But I don't think the show will be about this guy, but I think he will be in this show, and I think it'll be our introduction to Darth Plagueis, because there's going to be some rising up of the dark side as the High Republic ends, and as we start to see this show. And if it is around like Sith religion, uh, Darth Plagueis just makes sense to show up in that timeline. They've given us the timeline. They've given us that it's a dark side show, probably. Um, I think that's going to be awesome, and it's a like kind of a mystery suspense show. I think getting dark with kind of all the Sith stuff is going to be a tremendous show. That's probably the one I'm most excited for, even though Billy D. Williams is my best friend.
Do we get Prime Yoda in the Acolyte?
I would assume so, because he's probably
And I say
what is he?
prime, I mean the way that his race ages. He's what, 300,
He's
400 years old?
he's probably like, what is he, like 600 or 700 at that point?
Okay, so he's
Um,
probably in the prime of his life.
yeah, this would be assuming. I mean, Grogu's 50 and he's like an infant. So,
Right.
so I assume like being, 600, 700 is the equivalent of the baseball 27-year-old.
Oh, well, again, very exciting as far as all the shows that have been announced. Taka Waititi is getting a movie.
Oh man, I've got an idea here, Josh.
All
And
right.
I'm going to throw a couple ideas at you, because I don't want Taika to touch anything that we've seen, or even like maybe like or things that are like dark, like
Okay.
the Old Republic and like the Sith and stuff. I don't know that I want Taika's hands on that, because I want these to be a little more lighthearted.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there'll be action because it's Star Wars. I'm thinking either following around some pirates or some smugglers. Like I'm thinking kind of like a Hondo Anaka type guy. Now it doesn't have to be him, but I would be down with it being him. But
100%.
but Taika taking the reins of a show like that and their world, because I think it would be very separate from the rest of the galaxy, right? Because they kind of live on the outskirts of all of it. They don't fall under any jurisdiction. They do their own things. They're like, and there was, I'm trying to remember the name in the original Thrawn books. There's pirates in those as well, and they're very entertaining. And like, I don't know. I think if you gave them something like that, it could be really cool.
The Hondo episodes in Clone Wars and Rebels are just fantastic. And for those that have ridden the Millennium Falcon ride, Hondo is the main voice narrating that
Oh, really?
ride, giving
Oh,
you orders. Yeah, you're doing a job for Hondo with Chewie.
oh, that's awesome.
So there's a lot of people who are like, who's this guy? What's his voice? Like, I'm like, oh, not everybody knows who Hondo is unless you watch Clone Wars and Rebels. I think Taika Waititi would do an amazing job with Hondo. And Hondo has met everybody. He's got dealings with Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ezra, Ahsoka. That would be awesome. Okay, now I'm pumped. I'm hoping that's the direction. But the fact that you're bringing in Taika Waititi, let's just call it what it is. He saved Thor. Okay.
Yes.
Infinity War and Endgame do not work without a much better Thor. And you don't get that without Thor Ragnarok. And you don't get Thor Ragnarok with Taika Waititi. So that's why I slightly disagree with you, Chorizy. If there is something that maybe needs a tweak or a save in Star Wars to make it better, maybe he's the guy because he saved Thor in the Marvel universe. But my gosh, that would be a fantastic story if he did Hondo. Now you got me pumped. I agree with you. He's best when he's injecting humor. And that's what makes Thor Ragnarok such a great film and why I have to sit down and watch it every time, because there's just so many parts that make you laugh. There are serious parts. There are badass parts, especially when Thor discovers his true power. So I think Taika Waititi definitely has that. And he directed a couple episodes in season 1 as well.
He also, if you want to learn about his stuff and watch some other stuff that he has done, I would say definitely watch. There's a movie called What We Do in the Shadows that he's actually in with Jermaine Clement, which you might know from Flight of the Conchords. They came up together, like in theater and stuff and TV in New Zealand, and they are insane. They're both just insane.
Jermaine would have to be part of a Hondo show.
Absolutely. Like I think I think there's just a whole bunch of that group because they show up in the TV shows too. Like all those people could just be in there, and they all have a bunch of them have to be aliens because there's going to have to be tons of weird colors and all kinds of craziness. And so I just imagine like every participant in the Star Wars bar in the beginning in New Hope. Just put them all into a ship, and that's the show.
That would be fantastic. So we know what's been announced, but what hasn't been announced, because we know that this will not be the end of Star Wars storytelling. It's time to pitch future shows and movies. And I'm going to sit back. I only have one show idea, but I'm going to sit back and I'm going to listen to you, Chorizy. Pitch me your Star Wars show ideas that Kathleen Kennedy or whoever's really calling the shots now, maybe Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, they're the ones that are actually calling the shots, and Kathleen Kennedy's going with it. But I digress. It's your turn to pitch future Star Wars shows.
Yeah, so I decided I'm not good at this. I don't know how to create a Star Wars show. So what I decided to do instead, I'm going to give you the worst show ideas I could come up with for Star Wars, and you can rate them on a anger scale from R2-D2 beeping angrily to Anakin Skywalker killing an entire village of Tusken Raiders. So let's get into this. All right, I've got a show about the Broom Boy, only it's mostly mundane force tricks to clean the stable. So like he's like, I don't want to touch that big pile of crap. I'm just going to use my mind to lift that into the garbage can. 30 minutes of that each week.
Yeah, that's an R2-D2 head shake.
Because you think maybe someone will come find him and be like, oh, you have many midichlorians in your blood. All right. So the next one is the Jar Jar Binks Adventure Hour.
Oh, no.
And let me explain. There's no side plots. So it is a full hour of Jar Jar Binks.
That would be the worst show ever. It would just be like clawing my eyes out. Just like, that would be terrible. It would be so bad. I hate Jar Jar Binks so much.
The Sebulba Pod Racer Repair Show. It's kind of like Pimp My Ride, but he's just angry and mean to everybody.
Okay. I think a pod racing show could work.
Okay. I've got you. So this is a little more cerebral. This one. This is a 12-part Ken Burns documentary called "The March of the Porgs," and it's all about porg mating, but it's extremely graphic.
I mean, how graphic can it be?
Hey, I've never seen them make love, but apparently it is wild.
Oh, I can just hear. I can hear the show in my head. The pong scream. Oh my gosh. Okay. And is that it? That's all you got?
No, I've got 3 more.
Oh God.
Great.
Okay.
They're all great though. Don't worry. So this is a cooking show. This is Moisture Farm to Table with Baru and Owen. The only problem is it's all bantha dishes. They don't have any crate dragon, so it's just all bantha dishes.
Maybe you can get like Alex Gornishelli, right, from the cooking channel or Food Network. She could play the ant.
The next one is 21B. This is the medical droid that fixed Luke's hand. He just travels the galaxy and repairs all the arms torn off during Star Wars. Voiced by Dr. James Andrews. Are you in? I think you might be in for this one.
I might be. This has potential. Maybe it'd be like MASH, but with droids, and they tell terrible droid jokes to each other as they stitch arms back on.
All right, we'll put the treatment together for this one. One last one. I think you're going to be on board for this. We're just going to call it Sheev Nasty, and it's the sexual exploits of one Sheev Palpatine. We know he was out there banging away. All right, you don't have grandkids if you weren't. So we are going to follow the erotic tales of one Palpatine.
It could be Sheev Palpatine starring in How I Met Your Mother. That's what I'm hearing right now.
How I Met Your Grandmother.
I Met Your Grandmother.
Oh man, we've got. I think you're more in on these than I thought you'd be. I'm pretty psyched. I'm going to start writing these up. I will have each of these in a full episode form in the next week. That'll be next week's episode. We won't talk about the finale. It's just going to be a table read of Moisture Farm to Table.
And we'll invite the people that watch these videos, and for those that follow us on Twitter, we'll invite them to read characters for these treatments.
Absolutely. This is going to happen.
The Sheev Palpatine, How I Met Your Grandmother. I mean, you got syndication possibilities here. I don't know how you say no to that. I don't know.
I probably should have been at the investor meeting, just to be totally honest about this.
All right. So it's not so much as a show pitch for me, but I need to throw this out there because we talk about Operation Cinder and, as far as the timelines, we're going to be moving ahead with some. The Ahsoka series and the Ranger series are going to be during the same timeline as the Mandalorian. So we are moving forward from Return of the Jedi closer to Force Awakens, but there's still a pretty big gap. So there's plenty of storytelling opportunities there. And if you introduce Thrawn, that kind of helps bridge the two. And of course, we're going to Kenobi, which is 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. And obviously, is it 8 years before A New Hope? It's like smack dab right in the middle between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, because I think Luke is like 18 in A New Hope.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go down this route for the shows that are continuing down the Mandalorian timeline, Chorizy, and moving forward closer to Force Awakens, I don't know how you do this without bringing Leia and Luke back. And I'm wondering if we're going to get a future, and I'm just going to call this Star Wars story. Maybe you do it as a television series or a mini series. Maybe you do this as a movie. But I wonder if you have Thrawn introduced and Thrawn introducing the First Order. Obviously, you need the other side to combat that. And the person that creates that is Leia.
Yeah, I'm on board for this because in the books, Leia is badass.
Mm-hmm.
She is, and I mean, even in the movies, of course, but she's fearless. She's a fearless character. And like, that's the kind of thing you need when you're creating like this gigantic, big bad on a galactic level. You also, Ryan Johnson's really the only one that really tapped into Leia's force sensitivity and the things she could really do. Um, it'd be interesting to see, like what she's like in that time period we don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only been covered in like the books and comics and things like that. Um, so yeah, I think it'd be awesome. I think the tough part is casting. That's your biggest hurdle.
Yeah, because Leia, and I had to check this. I thought she would be older, but that's not the case. After Return of the Jedi, Leia and Luke are only 23. So you are trying to find a Carrie Fisher lookalike that's in their mid to late 20s. So happens that Carrie's daughter, Billy, is 28 years old. I know that she was in The Last Jedi
Yeah.
and Rise of Skywalker, but she's a blonde in those movies. If you color her hair, can you get away with it?
I don't know. She has a similar look. I don't think she looks exactly like her.
It's going to be tough to find someone that looks exactly like Leia, right?
Well, we got
Or
Luke
the
though.
Carrie Fisher. We do.
Sebastian Stan looks unnerving amount like
Is he Mark
like Mark
Hamill's
Hamill.
illegitimate son? I
It
mean, that
feels
is a
like it.
legit question.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think th- they do incredible work with special effects and everything now. Like, I don't think it would be out of the question to use her daughter, do some makeup, and just change her appearance just enough so that it's not. Her name's like Kate L or something um, in the new movies. Um, I think you could pull it off. I don't see why not. And I think it's a smart choice, right? Who's going to care more about that role
Right.
than her daughter?
Yeah, because if you're going to bring in Thrawn, again, there is somebody that needs to combat Thrawn, and that is the New Republic. And the New Republic is led by Leia. So I don't, and I keep bringing this up, and this is my struggle, and I know this is a difficult conversation that has got to be happening with Disney right now. I'm speculating, but the Force tells me, Chorizy, this is something that they're trying to tackle with. There is that gap
Yeah.
between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. We can tell all of these different types of stories to expand the universe. But it does seem odd that we don't get to see what happens to Leia and Luke in their prime years until we see them again and they're old.
Yeah,
Like,
especially
how do they
because
become legends?
we've even filled in the gaps between like episodes 2 and 3. So
Mm-hmm.
like
Yep.
it seems reasonable to fill in the gaps between 6 and 7.
And if it's not live action, I think they would have to do live action.
Yeah.
Even if it's not live action and you want to do the animation perspective, and then you got to have Carrie's daughter voice Leia or any voice character, I think that could be a good compromise. But I think this is something they're going to have to address. And I think eventually, maybe in 4 to 5 years, we may hear that Disney wants to bring Leia and Luke back, and they want to bring Han Solo back.
Yeah.
And they're going to be casting different people. It may make some Star Wars, the hardcore Star Wars fans angry, but I'm sorry that crowd is getting much older. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't care, but we know the drill here, right? Disney's going to make money. They're a money making machine. They're going to make these stories. I say, why not? And as far as future episodes or future television series and movies, I think if you're going to really bring Thrawn back, I think you got to cast Leia.
Yeah.
and even think about start casting a young Luke Skywalker. And I think Mark Hamill would totally be fine with that.
Yeah. I mean, and while we're at it, please include Donald Glover. Let's
Absolutely.
let's expand the Lando role even more. Let's also take a minute here to look at this picture and just think about the incredible cheekbones on both of these people. This is just wonderful.
It really is. And the hairstyle too, like the braid wrapping around the hair and the receding hairline for Thrawn, and yeah. And the eyes,
The red Thrawn eyes. I'm interested to see how they do that live action. I think that'll be kind of cool. Whether they do like, because I've seen him drawn different ways where he has like kind of like just the like here where it's like a normal human eye but they're red, and then I've seen him as just the whole thing is red. I'd like to see how they do it in live action, how they're going to do his eyes.
Yeah.
And
But
the
that's my
fact that
show
I'm
pitch.
just talking about Thrawn's cheekbones and eyes so much, it's disturbing even to myself, but nevertheless, I'm still interested in that.
All right. So our next week's episode is going to be the season finale. Din and Moff Gideon. Boba Fett. Is this the end of the line for Boba Fett? And Grogu. What's going to happen to Grogu? So what do you think, Chorizy? What are you guessing will happen in next week's season finale?
Man, it's sad, but Boba Fett got that brand new paint job on his armor, and
Got it nice and washed.
he's
Yeah.
not going to live through this one, mainly because Din needs a ship, uh, and it's got seismic charges on it, so Din wants that ship now too. So I think I think because we didn't get a Boba Fett show announcement, it really points to the idea that this is the end of his redemption tale. He's been a dick for a while, and now he and Fennec are going to redeem themselves, by giving their lives to save the child. I think Din gets Grogu, but there's part of me that thinks that Favreau and Filoni love the original trilogy so much that the second season, the second in the series of show, of this show, but of the kind of their trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
is going to end on a down note, and
Hmm.
he's not going to get him, and it would set up for a great season 3, right? Because the season 3 would be him tracking Gideon the whole season, trying to get Grogu back and building up a new crew of people to help him because he can't do it alone. And this is where you would get Ahsoka, you'd get the Rangers of the New Republic, you'd get Bo-Katan, you'd get all these different groups. To your point, last week, what we thought might happen at the end, you were saying that you think that they might swoop in.
Right. His Suicide Squad. Yeah.
I
And the
wonder,
waves.
I wonder if the waves are actually in season 3.
Hmm.
And so I think I think it's going to be. I think a lot of people are going to go. We need to be more depressed this year. So I think that the season 2 ending will be a little bit depressing. We're gonna lose some characters, and I think Grogu stays with Gideon, which is unfortunate, but it will make for a heck of a season 3.
Okay. So I like where you're going with the Empire Strikes Back. I think we get a little bit of that. I agree with you. Boba Fett and Fennec are going to die. I do think Din is going to get Grogu, but I think Cara Dune gets captured.
Ooh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
And she kind of serves as the Han Solo,
That's
where that's how we end Empire Strikes Back, right? In the medical bay, Lando and Chewie are going to fly to Tatooine to scope out Jabba's
that's
palace.
that's a really good one because that brings in the Rangers of the New Republic.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I thought might happen at the very end of this season is because Thrawn's got to come in at some point, right?
Mhm.
Like we got to.
Are we sure in this series? Yes.
I don't think you will see Thrawn. I think you will hear Thrawn,
I agree.
and I think that if I know the Thrawn thought work, this is a great distraction. These guys going after Gideon, all this. Thrawn striking some planet. Let's call it Mandalore. Let's say he attacks Mandalore. Um, just showing Eli Vanto, who's from the books, but a character who is just a guy. He's not Chiss, but he is working with the Chiss ascendancy. Just showing him and having Thrawn tell him a message to move forward with the strike of Mandalore or something, and that's how the season ends, where they attack Mandalore. Like you finally get like Grogu and Din reunited, and you're feeling good, and then Thrawn attacks Mandalore to end the season. That could be another way that they go, okay, well, here's what season 3 is going to be.
What about Navarro?
That's good too. Yeah, I mean, I think and that more people will have a connection with, like especially if someone like Grief Karga dies in it, right? Like because they left him there.
Well, Navarro's in the Outer Rim.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they're going to be living, right? They're not going to living. They being the new empire or new imperial forces. They're not ready to strike the core planets yet. That would put them too exposed.
Yeah. Oh man, that would be interesting, and I think it would be a cool way to introduce Thrawn, where it's just you maybe use Lars Mikkelsen's voice. It doesn't commit to him being there next season, but it's also would have been really easy for them to do, right? Because you could just have him record that at home and never show up on set. A guy playing Eli Vanto is just some dude. Like there's you can name that character whatever you want on the script and just have him do this one scene. No one would think anything about it. And that's very much in Filoni's style, to like not really give away that this is going to be in the show.
Yeah, I think, and after this episode, we're going to want season 3 immediately. Like there's just going to be the way it's going to end. We're going to get this big reveal. We're going to get something that just makes you so excited for, it sounds like next December 2021 is when new season 3 episodes of The Mandalorian are scheduled to begin streaming on Disney Plus, and that's the tentative goal right now. Obviously, COVID really impacts as far as shooting schedules, but they are going to start shooting the Kenobi show in March of 2021. So there's hope that they'll start shooting by the summer for the new season of The Mandalorian. But however this season finale ends, it's just going to make every single one of us can't wait for season 3. And like, I need to have it right away. So I'm really excited for next Friday. I think it's going to be the talk on all social media platforms, and I can't wait to recap this episode with you next week, Chorizy.
Oh man, I can't wait for it either. That's going to be, I'm excited for it right now, and we're far from it. But I mean, like, I'm going to have to blank out social media on Friday, like, because until I
don't
watch
check
it,
Twitter. Right.
Oh man. And between the announcements at Disney and the baseball, off season, I think I've almost broken my refresh finger. So I think I could use a day off of Twitter. So I think that'll be fine.
Well, next Friday is when the next episode is released, the season finale of season 2 of The Mandalorian. It's been a fantastic season so far, and we will be recording a new video to talk about that season finale and look ahead to season 3, and even discuss as far as possibilities on covering future Star Wars shows, such as Kenobi, when they are released, and we can start watching them on Disney Plus. But that will do it for this episode from a Southside point of view on the From the 108 YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. Along with Chorizy, I'm Josh. May the force be with you.